Death Among Us. Colony 13 burned beneath a white-blue sun that never seemed to blink. Its light did not warm the world so much as expose it, stripping every shadow from the cracked plains and leaving the settlement naked beneath the sky. Heat crawled over the metal walls in slow, glassy waves, and at night the outpost groaned as if the planet itself were breathing against the foundations. When humanity found the system, it had no proper name. Only survey number, a poisoned climate, and a silence so complete that even the neighboring civilizations treated it like a grave. To the other species of the galaxy, the system was not merely a bad investment. It was a place their captains avoided naming on open channels. Their probes had entered orbit centuries before and returned with frozen recordings, corrupted images, and reports sealed behind warnings no one bothered to translate anymore. There were richer worlds, gentler skies, and safer stars. From a distance, they looked at Colony 13 and came to the same conclusion every time: not worth the dead. Humanity disagreed. Humans had always been skilled at mistaken warnings for opportunities. Where others saw a forbidden silence, they saw unclaimed territory. Where others saw danger, they saw ownership without negotiation. And beneath the split and sun-blasted plains lay mineral veins dense enough to bend markets back on Earth. And the atmosphere, clean, untouched, and strangely sterile, promised a fortune to anyone brave or desperate enough to breathe it. Colony 13 was not beautiful, it was not welcoming, it was valuable, and that was enough to make people ignore the way the stars seemed to watch it. So the first settlers came with drills, prefabricated shelters, armed survey teams, and contracts promising fortunes their families would never see. They built walls against the heat, roads across the dust, and floodlights to hold back the dark when the sun finally sank. For a time, the colony pretended to be alive. Machines hummed, radios crackled, children slept behind sealed doors while their parents told them the noises outside were only the wind. Then the first body was found inside a locked habitat, with every camera turned toward the wall. His name was Elias Venn, a maintenance technician assigned to Habitat Block C. The door had been sealed from the inside. The emergency locks had not been forced. The air filters showed no toxin release, no pressure failure, no trace of fire or sabotage. By every system reading, Elias had been alone for 6 hours before his heart stopped. But the body told a different story. His fingernails were torn down to the quick, packed with black dust from beneath the habitat floor panels. His eyes were open and bloodshot, fixed on the ceiling, as if he had watched something descend toward him. Across the inside of the door, scratched deep into the metal, were 3 words repeated until his hands must have bled. It heard me. Command called it a stress incident. The official report blamed isolation, heat, sickness, and the kind of fear that grows in new settlements far from home. They ordered the recording systems inspected, the body sealed, and the workers returned to schedule before panic could spread through the colony faster than the truth. Then Mara Quell, one of the security officers assigned to guard the morgue, vanished from her post during the 3rd night. The cameras recorded her sitting still for 42 minutes, staring at the sealed body drawer. At 3:17, every light in the room dimmed. At 3:18, the cameras turned toward the wall again. At 3:19, Mara screamed over the comms, but her badge tracker never moved. When they opened the morgue, the drawer was empty. Mara was found inside it instead, folded into the metal compartment in a way no living body could have managed, and no machine in the room was built to do. On the wall above her, written in the same black dust from under Habitat Block C, were the words Elias had carved before he died. After that, no one slept without a light on. Families taped blankets over vents. Miners refused to enter the lower tunnels alone. Engineers heard tapping behind sealed panels and swore it answered when they tapped back. The colony's clean atmosphere began to feel less like a blessing and more like something preserved, something waiting. Buried beneath the earliest survey data, a junior analyst found an untranslated fragment from one of the alien probes. It was not a map, not a warning, and not a claim of ownership. It was a quarantine notice, repeated in 13 different languages, and attached to a single image, a dark shape beneath the colony site, curled around the planet's bones like something asleep. Colony 13. Security received the incident report before sunrise, though no one in the command bunker had slept enough to call it morning. By then, the deaths of Elias Venn and Mara Quell had moved beyond rumor. Every locked door, every dead camera, every smear of black dust had been copied into a classified file stamped for immediate containment. The colony could not afford panic, and command could not afford another body. So they assembled a 6-person investigation unit from the only people on Colony 13 still willing to walk toward the places everyone else avoided. All 6 were retired military contractors pulled from security, logistics, and deep sight escort duty. 3 had served in special operations before taking corporate work at the edge of human space. The other 3 were former Marine specialists trained for boarding actions, hostile environments, and close-quarter survival in places where rescue was only a theory. Major Heck stood at the front of the briefing room with his sleeves rolled to the elbows and a sidearm resting openly on the table beside him. He was older than the others by at least a decade, with the flat, emptied stare of a man who had survived too many missions and trusted none of them. Behind him, a wall screen displayed Mara's final camera feed. A gray room, a sealed drawer, and every lens turned away from the truth. "We need to find out what's killing our people, and we need to do it fast," Major Heck said. His voice carried through the room without rising. "If we can't identify it, contain it, or kill it, then we pull back and declare this mission failed." Someone in the back gave a dry laugh. "We should probably do that anyway," the voice said. "Otherwise, none of us are getting paid." No one laughed after that. The joke died in the stale air of the bunker, swallowed by the soft hum of the ventilation system. Somewhere above them, beyond layers of steel and scorched dust, something tapped once against a sealed wall. The 6-person team began their final preparations under the bunker's flickering lights. Major Hex would lead them personally, carrying the weight of command like a weapon he had never learned to put down. Beside him, Lieutenant Iris Smith checked the seals on her rifle and recon visor. She was the team's weapons expert assigned to overwatch and breach infiltration, the one who would watch every shadow before the others stepped into it. Sergeant Joe O'Connor loaded compact ammunition into a close-quarters carbine, then opened a wrist-mounted diagnostic kit with the same practiced hands. He had survived corridor fighting, shipboard breaches, and more failed evacuation zones than he liked to count. If something came at them in the dark, O'Connor was the man meant to meet it first, and if the colony systems lied, he was the one expected to make them talk. First Lieutenant Mary Cortez knelt beside a black case of compact drones, each one no larger than a human hand, built to crawl through vents, pipes, and spaces no soldier should enter alone. Her role was intelligence gathering, mapping blind corridors, scanning for heat signatures, and sending eyes ahead into the parts of Colony 13 that had stopped appearing on official schematics. Sergeant Major Claire Selinsky worked in silence at the explosives table, separating breaching charges from demolition packs with a precision that made the younger security officers keep their distance. She was an expert in explosives and close-quarters hand-to-hand combat, built for the moments when doors had to be opened and whatever waited behind them had to be put down before it could scream. At the far end of the room, Sergeant First Class Rylan Vale assembled his modified short-range sniper rifle one piece at a time, each part clicking into place with a sound too sharp for the bunker's stale silence. He moved with the patience of a man who believed distance was the only honest advantage in a fight. He was the sniper specialist, though no one knew what good a scope would do against something that killed behind locked doors and turned cameras away before it moved. The others noticed him without meaning to. Iris paused long enough to watch the barrel lock into place. O'Connor stopped loading rounds and glanced at the rifle like it was a bad omen someone had polished clean. Cortez lowered one of her drones back into its case, her eyes tracking the calm, careful movement of Ryland's hands. Even Selinsky, who rarely looked impressed by anything that did not explode, gave him a narrow look from across the table. Ryland did not speak, did not look up, and that somehow made the room feel colder. They all knew men like him, quiet, precise, dangerous from a distance. But on Colony 13, distance had not saved anyone yet. "You planning to shoot it from across the room, Vale?" O'Connor asked, trying to make it sound like a joke, and failing. Ryland slid the rifle's power cell into place without looking at him. "If it gives me a room, I'll use it." That thing turned every camera away before Mara screamed, Cortez said quietly. What makes you think it will stand still long enough for a scope? I don't, Ryland said. He checked the chamber once, then again. That's why I modified it for close work. Zelinsky gave a low, humorless chuckle. A sniper who wants to fight indoors. That's either confidence or a head injury. Iris kept her eyes on Ryland's hands. No, that's habit. He's expecting the first clean shot to be the only one we get. For the first time, Ryland looked up. His face showed no irritation, no fear, only the cold focus of a man already measuring angles no one else could see. If I get one, he said, don't step in front of it. When the gear checks were complete, the team stood together near the bunker exit, 6 hardened soldiers dressed for war against an enemy no one had seen. Before they stepped out, Ryland lifted a steaming mug of coffee from the edge of the table and took a slow drink, as if the ritual mattered more than the mission clock. Tradition, he said, setting the mug down with quiet finality. Beyond the sealed doors waited the lower access tunnels, the black dust, and the mystery buried under Colony 13. Major Hex looked over each of them once, then gave the order to move. Together they stepped toward the abyss of the unknown. The corridor beyond the bunker swallowed them one by one. Their boots struck the grated floor in a rhythm too loud for the empty passage, each step answered by the hollow groan of metal cooling somewhere deep inside the colony walls. Overhead lights flickered in tired pulses, revealing long stretches of sealed doors, abandoned tool carts, and dust gathered in corners where no dust should have been able to settle. Cortez sent a drone skittering ahead, its tiny lenses flashing blue in the dark. But every few meters the signal crackled as if something unseen were breathing across the feed. No one spoke. Even O'Connor kept his jokes behind his teeth. By the time Habitat Block C appeared at the end of the passage, half lit and waiting, the team had the same thought, but no one dared say it aloud. The colony did not feel deserted. It felt occupied. They reached the side of the first incident in silence, moving through Habitat Block C, with weapons raised and lights sweeping over the sealed walls. Major Hex crouched near the floor panels where Elias Venn had torn his fingers bloody and studied the black dust gathered in the seams. After a long moment, his expression hardened. Whatever had done this was not simply killing, he concluded. It was hunting. It was hungry. Worse, it was playing with its food before consuming its dinner. The creature moved with the instincts of an animal, but the pattern of the deaths revealed something colder beneath them. Intelligence. Something fast cut across their vision, a blur of motion too quick for shape, too close for comfort. Sergeant Joe O'Connor reacted on instinct and opened fire, his carbine spitting a short burst down the corridor. The projectiles tore sparks from the wall, almost catching the fleeing shadow before it vanished around the far corner. "Hold fire, you dumbass!" Hex snapped, his voice cracking through the corridor harder than the gunshots. Then it moved again. The blur broke across a side corridor in the opposite direction, fast enough to leave only the impression of limbs and shadow before vanishing into the dark. Ryland Vale's rifle tracked the motion, but he did not fire. His eyes narrowed instead. "It's testing our response," Ryland said, keeping his scope trained on the empty corridor. Hex shifted his stance, his weapon steady on the corridor ahead. "I noticed that too," Hex replied, his tone low and controlled. Iris tightened her grip on her rifle and scanned the ceiling vents, the corners, the places where the light failed. "Then the next pass will test our defense," Iris said, backing toward the center of the formation. "So let's be ready." The lights went out before anyone could answer. For one full second, Habitat Block C vanished into absolute darkness. 6 rifles snapped upward. Cortez cursed under her breath as her drone feed dissolved into static. Somewhere above them, something scraping along the inside of the ceiling panels. Not running now, not hiding, but circling. Hex raised a fist, freezing the team in place. The sound stopped directly overhead. Then every comm in their helmets crackled at once, and a voice that sounded almost human whispered through the static, I heard you." O'Connor swallowed hard somewhere in the formation. "I'm guessing it's telepathic," he muttered. No one answered. Above them, the ceiling panel began to bend inward. The ceiling panel burst inward. Something dropped hard in front of the 6-person team, hitting the floor with a wet, heavy crack. that made the grating jump beneath their boots. For the first time, the thing stopped hiding long enough for them to see it clearly. It was built like a man in the middle range of size, lean and corded with muscle, but its skin was wrong, pale white, stretched tight and leathery over a body that looked as if it had been folded out of the dark. Its face had no eyes and no sockets where eyes should have been, only smooth, empty skin above a mouth too wide for any human skull. That mouth split open in a grin that reached toward the places where ears should have been, though there were only 2 dark holes in the side of its head. Inside the smile, 8-inch teeth gleamed like daggers. It rose onto 2 legs for one impossible second, then dropped to all 4s with a speed that made every weapon light stutter across its body. Before Hex could give an order, 2 more shapes hit the floor behind it. 3 of them, not one hunter circling the team, but a pack. They opened their mouths together, and the sound that came out was not a roar. It was a siren, high, metallic, and piercing, like a battleship alarm torn apart by rusted metal grinding against rusted metal. The shriek punched through their helmets and buried itself behind their eyes. All 6 soldiers staggered, clapping hands over their ears as the pitch climbed higher, sharper, impossible to block out. The creatures crouched in the flickering dark, grinning through their dagger teeth, and then they attacked. Hex forced himself through the pain first. He did not try to shout over the scream. He pointed. Iris understood and fired before the order could become words. Her rifle cracked 3 times. Each shot brightened the darkness, driving the nearest creature sideways across the corridor. The rounds punched into its chest and shoulder, but instead of falling, it twisted with the impacts, using the force to launch itself at the wall. Its claws hit metal and held. It ran sideways along the corridor, like gravity had forgotten it. "Contact front and rear," O'Connor barked, finally finding his voice. He stepped into the gap behind Hex and opened up with controlled bursts. Muzzle flashes strobed across the block, catching pieces of the monsters and fragments. White limbs, black mouths, teeth like knives, hands spreading 2 wide against the walls. One of the things came low, almost flat to the floor. O'Connor tracked it and fired into its path, but it moved between the shots, bending its spine in a way no living creature should have survived. It slammed into him shoulder first and drove him backward into a door hard enough to dent the frame. Selinsky was already moving. She caught the creature by the side of its neck before it could bite down and jammed her forearm under its jaw. The mouth snapped shut inches from O'Connor's face, dagger teeth scraping sparks off his helmet visor. Selinsky planted 1 boot against the wall, shoved with everything she had, and hurled the creature off him. It hit the floor, rolling, came up on all 4s, and grinned wider, as if pain was only another language it understood. "Cortez, eyes!" Hex snapped. Cortez dropped to one knee and released the rest of her drones. 4 tiny machines shot from their case and scattered across the corridor, crawling up the walls and across the ceiling on magnetic legs. Their lights painted the darkness in hard blue lines. The creatures hated it. All 3 recoiled at once, their blank faces twitching toward the sudden web of sensors. For the first time, the team saw the pattern. The things were not invisible. They were moving between attention, waiting for eyes to shift before crossing the space where no one watched. "They don't like being tracked," Iris said. "Then keep every angle lit," Hex said. "Veil!" Ryland was already down on one knee, rifle braced against the support beam. He did not follow the creature that everyone else could see. He watched the space where it would have to be next. His breathing slowed. The corridor narrowed in his scope, all smoke, blue drone light, and flashing teeth. One monster sprang from the ceiling toward Iris, arms spread wide. Ryland fired once. The shot hit the creature in the side of the head and tore it off its path. It crashed into the floor at Iris's feet, limbs thrashing, mouth opening and closing without sound. Black fluid sprayed across the grating in a hot arc. Iris stepped back, put 2 rounds into its chest, then another into the open mouth. The body convulsed and went still. For half a second, hope entered the corridor. Then the dead thing screamed. The sound came from its body, even though the head was ruined. A wet mechanical shriek that made the drones glitch and drop from the walls. Every light flickered red. The 2 surviving creatures answered it, and the corridor seemed to fold around their voices. Hex felt his knees almost buckle. Cortez cried out as one drone burst apart against the ceiling. O'Connor, bleeding from the nose, forced his carbine up and kept firing at the closest shape. Selinsky grabbed a breaching charge from her vest, armed it with her thumb. and slapped it against the floor, grating between them and the advancing creatures. "Back!" she roared. Hex caught Cortez by the back of her armor and dragged her behind a support column as Iris pulled O'Connor clear. Ryland rolled behind a fallen tool cart, keeping his rifle tight against his chest. Selinsky was the last to move. One creature lunged through the smoke, mouth spread wide enough to swallow her faceplate. She met it with a combat knife in one hand and a pistol in the other, driving the blade up under its jaw while firing twice into its ribs. It hit her like a falling engine. They went down together. The charge detonated. The blast punched the corridor full of white fire and shredded metal. The floor buckled upward. The sound erased every other sound, even the siren scream, and for one blessed second, there was only pressure, heat, and dust. Hex slammed against the column hard enough to blur his vision. When he forced his eyes open, alarms were flashing through a haze of smoke. The creature Selinsky had stabbed lay in two pieces near the breach, still twitching, its claws scraping weak lines into the floor. "Selinsky!" Iris shouted. A hand rose from the smoke and gave a slow thumbs up. Selinsky pushed the dead weight off her chest and sat up, armor scored, visor cracked, but alive. "I hate this colony," she rasped. No one had time to answer. The last creature was gone. Hex turned in a slow circle, weapon raised, trying to find it through the smoke and red emergency lights. The corridor was torn open from the blast, wires hanging like veins from the ceiling. Cortez's surviving drone limped across the wall, its sensor clicking weakly. Ryland swept the upper corners with his scope. Iris covered the rear. O'Connor pressed one hand to his bleeding nose and kept his carbine up with the other. Then Cortez's drone feed snapped back for one clear frame. The last creature was not ahead of them. It was above them, folded inside the torn ceiling, perfectly still and grinning. "Ceiling!" Cortez screamed. The thing dropped straight into the center of them. Hex fired from less than 3 feet away. Iris fired with him. O'Connor emptied the rest of his magazine into the blur. The creature spun through the storm of rounds, one arm snapping out and catching Hex across the chest. His armor saved him from being opened completely, but the impact threw him across the corridor and left 3 deep grooves smoking through the plating. Ryland did not have a clean shot. Iris was in front of it. O'Connor was too close. Selinsky was still getting to her feet. The creature turned its blank face toward Cortez, and its mouth opened again, wider than before. Cortez froze as the first needle of that siren sound cut into the air. Ryland moved. He dropped the rifle, drew his sidearm, and stepped into the creature's shadow before anyone could stop him. The monster snapped toward the motion, teeth closing where his throat had been a heartbeat earlier. Ryland twisted under the bite, jammed the pistol into the side of its mouth, and fired until the weapon locked empty. The creature reeled, shrieking through ruined teeth. Iris slammed her rifle barrel against its chest and fired point blank. O'Connor joined her from the side. Selinsky came in last, driving a demolition spike through the creature's spine and pinning it to the floor, grating. Hex, groaning as he forced himself upright, raised his sidearm with both hands. "Stay dead," Hex said. He fired into the creature's open mouth once, twice, a third time. The body spasmed, clawed at the floor, then collapsed with a final wet shudder. This time no scream followed. For a long moment the 6 of them stood in the ruined corridor, breathing hard beneath the flashing alarms. Smoke curled around their boots. Black fluid hissed where it touched the heated metal. The 3 bodies lay scattered across the block, twisted and broken, but even dead they seemed to grin at the team from the floor. O'Connor lowered his empty carbine and laughed once, sharp and breathless. "Please tell me that was all of them." Cortez stared at her cracked drone display. Static rolled across the screen, then cleared just long enough to show movement far beneath Habitat Block C. Not 3 shapes, not 6. Dozens of pale bodies crawled through the dark tunnels below, all moving toward the surface. Her face went cold. "No," she whispered, and that was just the first pack. Hex stared at the drone display for one long second, then let out a breath that sounded almost like a laugh. "We need to call this in," he said. "If Colony 13 wants to keep this piece of shit planet, Command needs to know what's crawling under it." He looked from the bodies on the floor to the movement beneath the Habitat block, his jaw tightening. "This is above my pay grade." He checked the magazine in his sidearm, saw almost nothing left, and gave a dry chuckle. Or if they want to evacuate the entire planet, that would be good to know too. His eyes lifted toward the torn ceiling as another distant shriek rolled up from below. Definitely above our pay grade. Team 6 pulled back to the surface under red emergency lights, battered, half-deaf, and running on the last of their adrenaline. No one called it a retreat. Hex made sure of that. They were falling back to refit, reload, and turn Colony 13 from a settlement into a fortress before the things beneath Habitat Block C decided to come hunting upward. At Colony 13 Security Command, the fight footage killed every argument before it could begin. The room went silent as the cracked drone feed showed pale bodies crawling through the lower tunnels, dozens of them moving with that same impossible speed. Command officers watched the monsters climb walls, fold into vents, and vanish whenever the sensor slipped. By the time the recording ended, every face in the bunker had gone pale. "We hold the surface," Hex said. His armor was still scored across the chest, 3 deep claw marks burned into the plating. "Seal every access corridor leading up from the lower blocks. Weld the service doors shut if you have to. Motion sensors in every vent, pressure alarms in every maintenance shaft, drones watching every blind corner. If those things come up, I want to know before they take their first breath of colony air." For once, no one questioned him. Security teams moved through the colony in waves, dragging barricades, portable floodlights, ammunition crates, and cutter rigs into position. Engineers locked down stairwells and service lifts. Welders sealed old tunnel hatches behind sheets of reinforced plating. Cortez supervised the sensor grid herself, sending drones into the vents and crawl spaces, while tech crews mounted fresh scanners every 20 meters. The creatures lived between attention, then Colony 13 would give them nowhere, unseen to move. Iris organized firing lanes through the main corridors, marking kill zones with strips of orange light. O'Connor checked every barricade personally, cursing under his breath whenever he found a weak angle or a door that did not seal fast enough. Selinsky turned choke points into traps, planting charges where the blast would collapse the corridor without bringing the whole colony down on top of them. Ryland took the high walkways inside Security Command and mapped his shots in silence, one line of fire after another. By the time the first emergency transmission left for Earth, Colony 13 was already changing shape around them. Civilian sectors went dark under lockdown. Families were moved behind blast doors. Every hallway smelled of hot metal, burned dust, and fear. Backup would come, but even at priority burn, Earth was too far away to save them quickly. For now, they had the weapons in their hands, the walls around them, and whatever nerve they had left. Hex stood in the center of the command bunker, helmet under one arm, watching the sensor map bloom with red warning zones beneath the colony. Somewhere far below, something screamed again, faint but rising through the metal like pressure in a pipe. He looked at the exhausted faces around him and gave the only order left that made any sense. "Sit tight," he said. "Defend everything.